Judge calls black woman unqualified. Then she stuns the court with her legal genius. The oak-paneled courtroom was suffocating, not because of the heat, though the fluorescent lights hummed harshly above, but because of the weight in the air. It pressed down on every shoulder, twisted in every breath, and vibrated beneath every shoe tapping against the polished tile floor. But nothing was heavier than the silence that fell after Judge Leon Whitmore slammed his gavel down and said the words that shattered everything. "You are not qualified to be here," he barked, his voice slicing through the stillness like a blade through silk. "This courtroom is no place for amateur theatrics or social experiments." Gasps rippled through the audience. One juror's hand twitched at his tie. A woman in the gallery covered her mouth. Somewhere in the back, someone snorted, loud enough to be heard, soft enough to pretend it wasn't intentional. But Maya Jennings didn't flinch. She stood alone at the defense table, spine straight, her breath caught just below her rib cage like a clenched fist. Her hands, clasped tightly in front of her, trembled only slightly, barely enough to notice. Her eyes were dry, but behind them was a storm ready to explode. 1,000 hours of study, 1,000 nights of sleepless research, 1,000 rejections, each one overcome with grit and steel. But now one sentence from a man in robes and entitlement had dragged her down like a noose around her name. "Your Honor," she said, her voice level but tight, "I've been admitted to this court by the bar. My qualifications are on file." Judge Whitmore's lip curled as he leaned forward. "The bar may have let you through, Miss Jennings, but this courtroom is built on standards, not charity, and quite frankly," he let the silence build, as if letting the gavel of humiliation swing freely in the air. "I don't know how you got past security." Laughter erupted, not from everyone, but from enough of them. The prosecutor, Marcus Lowell, smirked openly, arms folded, confidence dripping like oil. A bailiff coughed behind his hand. Someone whispered something about affirmative action near the back, and it ignited a ripple of quiet, stifled amusement. Maya blinked once, hard. She would not cry, not now, not here, not for them. She shifted her gaze to the man sitting beside her at the table. Eric DeWitt, her client, her reason for standing in this toxic chamber. A black man in his 40s, shoulders slumped not from guilt, but from exhaustion. His eyes met hers with the quiet desperation of a man who'd already been found guilty by society long before he stepped into court. He hadn't said a word since the trial began, not out of silence, but out of survival. The state claimed Eric had embezzled over $300,000 from his position as operations manager at a mid-sized logistics firm. The evidence? A handful of electronic transfers, logged under his name, but from an unsecured system anyone could have accessed. The reality? Eric had flagged inconsistencies weeks before the accusation, and days later he was escorted out by security. No warning, no hearing, no explanation. Maya had taken his case pro bono, not because he couldn't afford representation, though that was true, but because something about his story rang too familiar. Her own father had once stood in a courtroom like this, wearing the same expression, that look that said, "They're not interested in the truth. They're here to bury me." The judge tapped his gavel again, this time with less ceremony. "Miss Jennings, this court does not have time to entertain what I can only describe as a poor imitation of legal competence. Your objections are sloppy, your motion filings are riddled with amateur mistakes, and your presence is, frankly, an insult to this process." Maya opened her mouth, but no words came. Not yet. Her heart thudded in her ears like the distant sound of war drums. But she wouldn't march into rage. Not on his terms. "I respectfully object to this personal attack, Your Honor," she said, steadier this time. "My motions are within procedure. My filings were submitted on time. If there are mistakes, I'm happy to address them." "You can address them," Judge Whitmore sneered, "by taking a remedial course. Or better yet, finding a different profession." Maya's fists clenched at her sides. She could feel every eye in the room on her, some sympathetic, some amused, most indifferent, but she stood firm. Because if she sat down now, if she let this moment pass unanswered, she wasn't just failing herself. She was failing Eric, and every client who would come after him. Every young black girl watching this broadcast who dared dream of standing where Maya stood. She stepped forward. Judge Whitmore narrowed his eyes. That's enough, Miss Jennings. Maya didn't blink. No, it's not. Not until this court acknowledges that Eric DeWitt has the right to a defense. Not a defense you approve of, not a defense you prefer, but a defense guaranteed to him under the Constitution. Low murmurs broke out. Even Marcus Lowell shifted in his seat, his smirk twitching at the edges. You are walking a dangerous line, the judge warned. So is every person who's ever stood up to injustice in this room, Maya shot back. But just when Maya thought the worst had passed, that the judge's insult would be the harshest blow she'd endure, the system struck again. And this time, it didn't just try to humiliate her. It tried to erase her entirely. The clock struck 11:47 a.m. when the atmosphere in courtroom 3A shifted from tense to volatile. What had once been a procedural cross-examination was now unraveling into something darker, something uglier. And Maya Jennings, standing alone in the storm, could feel the walls of justice closing in like jaws around her. She was halfway through her rebuttal, laying out the inconsistencies in the prosecution's bank statements, when the interruption came. Sharp, cold, deliberate. That's enough, Judge Leon Whitmore snapped, raising a hand like a monarch silencing a servant. You're wasting the court's time. Maya froze mid-sentence. Your Honor, I'm establishing the timeline. I said that's enough, he repeated, gavel slamming like a gunshot. You've made your point. Poorly. The murmurs from the audience grew louder, some in disbelief, some amused. But Maya could feel it, all of it, settling into her chest like concrete. At the prosecution table, Marcus Lowell, slick in a $3,000 suit and unearned confidence, leaned back in his chair with a smirk that practically screamed, I told you she'd crumble. She's filibustering, Your Honor, Lowell chimed in, voice oozing with condescension. This isn't a lecture hall. It's a courtroom. Maybe someone should remind Miss Jennings. The jab drew a few chuckles from the gallery. Even one of the jury members cracked a faint smile. Maya scanned the room, hoping, desperately, that at least one person would intervene. Speak up, object. But all she saw were blank faces, some pitying, most indifferent. I object to this characterization, Maya said, forcing her voice to remain calm. I'm providing legal context to demonstrate the falsified timestamp on the bank document submitted into evidence. Miss Jennings, Judge Whitmore interrupted, his tone suddenly dripping with mock patience. Let me be clear. Since you seem to be struggling with courtroom decorum, I am revoking your right to continue this defense. A collective gasp surged through the courtroom, like a wave crashing against stone. Maya blinked, sure she had misheard. Excuse me? The judge adjusted his robe, then looked down at her over his reading glasses as if she were a child who had broken a vase. You are hereby removed as counsel of record for Mr. DeWitt. This court can no longer entertain your efforts given your repeated procedural violations and blatant disrespect for this institution. Your Honor, Maya said, voice rising now, finally unable to contain the shock. That's unconstitutional. My client has the right to his chosen representation. You can't just... I can, Whitmore growled, and I just did. Marcus Lowell leaned forward, feigning surprise. Will, of course, be happy to proceed with court-appointed counsel should the defendant wish to continue his defense. Maya turned to Eric DeWitt, who looked as confused and broken as she felt. His lips moved, but no words came. He looked at her like a man watching his last hope being ripped from his hands by wolves in black robes. I object. Maya tried again, but the gavel came down harder this time. You're dismissed. There was no appeal, no review, no further discussion, just a brutal finality, like a door slamming shut in a burning building. Maya's jaw tightened as she gathered her notes. Useless now, nothing more than ashes of effort, and forced herself to stand tall. She wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of them, not in front of the people who had always believed the courtroom was never meant for someone like her. She turned toward the gallery and the full weight of 100 stares hit her like a flood. Eyes filled with scorn, amusement, pity, that special kind of pity that always wore the mask of superiority. There she goes, someone whispered. Didn't last long, did she? Thought she could play with the big boys. She walked the aisle slowly, each step like wading through cement. The silence behind her was deafening, but not complete. Marcus Lowell was laughing, low, smug, satisfied. When she passed the jury box, one juror, an older white man with a sour expression, looked her up and down and gave a slight shake of his head. Disappointment? Number something worse. Disdain. And then came the final humiliation. As she reached the courtroom doors, a voice called out behind her, bright, sarcastic, cruel. Better luck next time, counselor. The door creaked open, and she stepped out into the hallway, where the world felt too loud and too bright. The buzz of the fluorescent lights, the echo of footsteps, the mechanical hum of the soda machine down the corridor. They all stabbed at her like needles under skin. Her breath came shallow. Her hands shook as she clutched her briefcase to her chest, like armor long since pierced. No one followed her, not even Eric. He was still inside, probably still in shock, probably still wondering how this could happen. But Maya knew. This wasn't about evidence. This wasn't about procedure. This was about erasure. They didn't just want to silence her voice. They wanted to erase her from the narrative entirely. She moved to a bench near the wall and sat down, staring blankly at the marble tile beneath her feet. The marble bench outside the courtroom felt colder than concrete. Maya sat motionless, eyes blank, lips pressed tight. But inside her chest, chaos. Her heart was a war drum, and every beat echoed a memory she couldn't bury. No matter how many degrees she'd earned, or how many suits she wore. Because this wasn't the first time she had watched the system crush a black life under its heel. The first time, it had destroyed her father. Her mind drifted, uninvited, back to the sound of sirens howling through the narrow alleys of her childhood. The South Heights projects didn't have street names, just numbers painted on rusted walls and broken mailboxes. Buildings leaned like drunks, brick cracked open like ribs. The air always smelled of mold, metal, and desperation. Maya was 8 the night it happened. She had been sitting cross-legged on the floor, coloring superheroes with a crayon no longer big enough to hold. Her father, Lionel Jennings, was in the kitchen, making grilled cheese sandwiches. The fancy kind, with 2 slices of government cheese instead of 1. He was humming Marvin Gaye. Then the door burst open. The frame splintered. Guns pointed at her father's chest. On the ground, hands where I can see them. Her world flipped. She remembered screaming, not words, just fear. Her mother had already left months before. Lionel was all she had. He didn't fight, didn't resist, but they tackled him anyway, face pressed into their filthy carpet, knees jammed into his spine. One officer glanced at her and hesitated. The other didn't. Wrong guy, Lionel said over and over, blood pooling from his mouth. You got the wrong guy. They never listened. They never do. The charges? Armed robbery. 3 witnesses claimed they saw a tall black man with dreadlocks and a gray hoodie leaving a liquor store with a duffel bag. That was it. No fingerprints, no DNA, no surveillance footage. Just 3 words. He looked familiar. Lionel had never even owned a gray hoodie. The trial lasted 2 days. The verdict came in under 4 hours. Guilty. 20 years. Maya never forgot the way the judge avoided looking at her, how the prosecutor had laughed during recess as if it was just another box checked off. She never forgot how small her father looked in that orange jumpsuit, how he tried to smile for her, but couldn't quite fake it. You keep your head high, baby girl, he told her through the scratched glass of the visitation booth. This world will try to tell you who you are. You tell it who you really are. But he never got the chance to finish his sentence. 4 years into his term, Lionel died in prison, stabbed in a laundry room by another inmate. Wrong place, wrong time. Again. The system had chewed him up and spit him out in a box, and no one even said sorry. Maya's world never went back to normal, but she made a promise. To herself, to him, that one day she'd be the woman who could have saved him. She didn't know how, not yet, but she could read, she could study. While other kids fought over new shoes or candy, Maya hoarded textbooks from the free library bin. She taught herself Latin roots, legal terms, courtroom procedures. She memorized case law by flashlight under moldy ceilings. At 14, she filed her first FOIA request. At 16, she confronted the DA who had prosecuted her father. He didn't even remember the case. Just another statistic, he muttered. Exactly. And that's why she would burn the statistics to the ground. Maya clawed her way through college with 3 part-time jobs and 0 safety nets. She slept in buses between shifts, took cold showers at the gym, skipped meals. She didn't care. Law school came next. Every lecture was a weapon. Every textbook was armor. She studied the Constitution like scripture. She cross-examined professors in her head until they couldn't look her in the eye. And when she passed the bar, she didn't celebrate. She cried, not because she was proud, because she knew her father should have lived to see it, but he didn't, because someone decided he looked familiar. Now Maya sat outside another courtroom, stripped of her power, humiliated by the same kind of men who'd destroyed her father. And she realized something terrifying. They hadn't changed, and they never would, unless someone like her made them. She wiped her eyes, stood slowly, and stared at the double doors behind her. Inside, her client, a good man, a black man, was being served up to the wolves. Just like Lionel. The night was already too dark when Maya stepped into her apartment, but the silence made it feel darker. She dropped her bag, kicked off her heels, and walked straight to the whiteboard mounted in her living room. Dozens of sticky notes covered it like scars. Case numbers, dates, bank codes, names, arrows pointing everywhere and nowhere. At the center, circled in red, Eric DeWitt. Innocent? Maya didn't believe in question marks anymore. Not after what she had seen, not after what she had found. 3 days earlier, she had requested the full audit trail on the bank transaction that allegedly linked Eric to the $300,000 embezzlement. The state's primary evidence was a clean PDF of a bank statement submitted by the prosecution, showing Eric authorizing a suspicious transfer at 9:03 p.m. on March 11th. But something didn't add up, so she dug deeper. Maya didn't have access to the raw system logs, but a friend in IT owed her a favor. What she got back sent chills down her spine. The metadata on the PDF showed it was created 3 days before the funds were even reported missing. That meant one thing. The document was fabricated. Someone had planted evidence. Someone had wanted Eric in that courtroom, and Maya was going to find out who. Over the next 48 hours, she barely slept. She cross-referenced employee IDs, internal memos, subpoenaed correspondence from the company Eric worked for, Altrex Capital, and found another crack. A man named Greg Palmer claimed he'd seen Eric tampering with financial logs. His statement was central to the prosecution's narrative, but Palmer didn't appear on any official employee records from the quarter in question. He didn't even exist in the payroll system. No tax ID, no badge registration. Greg Palmer was a ghost, or worse, an actor. She checked social media, hiring databases, LinkedIn, nothing. Then she stumbled across a private Instagram account linked to an off-the-books consulting firm connected to, of all people, Randall Carrington, the CEO of Altrex Capital. The dots began to connect like blood trails on concrete. Carrington had motive, access, and a reason to silence whistleblowers. If Eric had stumbled onto financial misconduct within the company, it would make perfect sense to frame him, remove the problem, control the narrative, keep the machine running. But uncovering the truth came with a cost. The first warning was subtle. A text at 2:37 a.m. Stop digging. He's guilty. You're next. Block number. Encrypted. She didn't tell anyone. Not yet. She was used to pushback, used to threats. But the next one wasn't subtle. The next one almost killed her. That evening, after a 12-hour stretch of research at a downtown library, Maya walked out into the parking garage. It was quiet, too quiet. No music, no footsteps, no voices. She clicked her key fob. The lights on her car blinked. She took one step. The roar of an engine shattered the silence. A black SUV shot from the shadows. No headlights. Maya dove to the side just as the front bumper clipped her hip. She hit the ground, scraping her palms on the concrete. Tires screeched. The SUV vanished into the ramp above, gone before she could even scream. She sat there shaking, bruised, bleeding, and breathing like the world was collapsing on top of her. She called the police. They showed up 20 minutes later, took her statement, looked at the cameras. Looks like a drunk driver, one officer said, shrugging. No plates. Probably joyriding. That wasn't a drunk driver, Maya snapped. That was an ambush. That was a message. The officer exchanged a glance with his partner. Do you have any enemies, ma'am? She hesitated. Then she said it. Randall Carrington. Both officers went still, then laughed. The CEO of Altrex? That Carrington? Yes, she said. He's framing my client. I have evidence. The taller officer raised a hand. Miss Jennings, you're a defense attorney, not a detective. Maybe you're just under a lot of stress. Maya stared at him, disbelief twisting her insides. Are you seriously suggesting I imagined getting hit by a vehicle? We're just saying, he said, closing his notepad. Maybe take a step back before this gets out of hand. They left her standing in that parking lot with a torn blazer and blood on her knuckles. The next morning, her mailbox was open. Inside, a manila envelope. No return address. No markings. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, a single Polaroid. It showed her, standing outside Eric DeWitt's house 2 days ago. The angle was high, distant, taken from a rooftop. The message on the back scrawled in black ink, "We see you." Maya's knees buckled. She dropped the photo like it was a live wire. For the first time in years, fear clawed into her throat like a living thing. Not courtroom fear, not I might lose this case fear. Real fear. Fear for her life. Still, she didn't stop. She scanned the photo, checked for fingerprints. Nothing. She had it analyzed for metadata. Useless. Whoever was behind this wasn't sloppy. They were calculating. Powerful. She tried going to the DA's office. The receptionist told her to wait. She sat for 2 hours, no one came out. She emailed a contact at the state bar. No response. She left voicemails for every media outlet in town. Silence. The machine was too big, too loud, too polished, and she was a fly trying to stop a war engine. But that night, staring at her conspiracy wall, one name kept flashing in her mind like a warning siren. Carrington. Randall Carrington had silenced people before. Maya found an old article from 5 years ago about a whistleblower who died in a boating accident. The man had worked in Altrex's compliance department. 2 weeks before he died, he'd filed a report about fraudulent vendor accounts. The file disappeared. No one followed up. History was repeating itself, and Maya knew, if she didn't act fast, Eric DeWitt wouldn't just be convicted. He'd vanish, just like the others. And maybe this time, so would she. The diner was nearly empty, its flickering neon sign casting an eerie glow through the rain-slicked windows. Maya sat in the back booth, hood up, fingers wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Her eyes never left the door. At 9:46 p.m., a man slipped inside, head down, coat soaked. He moved quickly, cautiously, sliding into the booth across from her without a word. "You're Terrence?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, eyes darting around. "You followed?" "No," she said, though her heart was pounding. "You have it?" He reached into his coat and pulled out a flash drive sealed in a clear plastic bag. His hand trembled as he set it on the table. "This could get me killed." Maya took the bag with deliberate care. "Then let's make sure it means something." Terrence exhaled shakily. "It's a recording from a boardroom call, one I wasn't supposed to be on. Carrington was talking about DeWitt, about framing him." Maya's breath caught. "They planned it," he continued. "The whole thing, the forged statements, the witness, it's all fake. They picked DeWitt because he was easy to silence." "Why give this to me?" she asked. "Because I know what they did to your father," Terrence said, "and because no one else will do anything." Maya felt the flash drive burn in her hand. This wasn't just evidence. It was a weapon, dangerous, explosive, and possibly deadly. "Don't contact me again," Terrence said. "If they find out I helped you—" "I understand," Maya said softly. He was gone a moment later, disappearing into the rain-soaked night. Back at her office, Maya plugged the flash drive into her laptop with trembling hands. It was encrypted, but a small scrap of paper inside the plastic had the password, Fall Guy 117. She entered it. Inside, one file. Carrington call, audio.mp3. She hit play. The quality was rough, but the voices were clear. Carrington's voice rang through her office, cold, calculating, unfiltered. If DeWitt doesn't back off, we shut him down. Pin it on him. Make the paper trail match. I want it clean. No questions. Another man's voice, nervous. And if someone asks questions? Carrington laughed. Then we bury them. Click. Silence. Maya stared at the screen, stunned. This wasn't conspiracy theory. This was truth. Brutal, raw, and undeniable. She backed it up immediately. One flash drive in her boot, another hidden in a cabinet, a third upload to an encrypted cloud. But even as she moved, a chill crept down her spine. Because now she knew something for certain. She wasn't paranoid. She was being hunted. And this time, she wasn't just defending Eric DeWitt. She was going to war. But just as Maya began to believe the tide was finally turning, just as the truth seemed within reach, the darkness pushed back, harder, colder, and far more vicious than she ever imagined. It happened just after midnight. Maya had just poured herself a second cup of stale coffee, adrenaline still surging from what she'd heard on the recording. Carrington's voice echoed in her head like a curse. Then we bury them. The flash drive was now safely tucked inside her boot, and 2 backup copies sat in her locked cabinet. She knew she didn't have much time. She had to go public fast. But the night had other plans. She heard the first sound at 12:11 a.m., a soft clink of metal, then a second, a subtle shift in the atmosphere, like the building itself had taken a breath it shouldn't have. Her spine stiffened. She stood slowly listening. Her office, located on the 3rd floor of a nearly abandoned business complex, was usually silent at this hour. But now every creak of the floorboards, every distant hum of electricity felt like a warning. Then the lights cut out. Her laptop screen flickered once, then died. Total darkness. Maya froze. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The silence was no longer empty. It was charged, thick with danger. Then the crash. Her front door splintered open with brutal force, the sound reverberating through the office like an explosion. She ducked instinctively, scrambling behind her overturned desk. Heavy boots thundered across the hardwood floor. Drawers yanked open. Metal screeched. Papers flew. They weren't just searching, they were hunting. She tried not to breathe. Her heart pounded so loud she was certain they could hear it. A flashlight beam swept across the walls, bouncing off law books and framed degrees, tearing across every corner like a blade. Then a voice, low, muffled, no words, just a grunt. They went straight for the cabinet. Maya's stomach dropped. The lock gave way with one kick. She heard the drive being taken, the soft zip of a bag, the low mutter of success. Then just like that, they were gone. The front door creaked on its hinges, left swinging open like a final insult. For a long moment, Maya didn't move. She waited in the stillness, hoping, begging, that this was some sick hallucination. But when she stood up, the reality was worse than any nightmare. Her office was destroyed, drawers overturned, cabinets ripped open, case files shredded and scattered across the floor like snow. Her desk was broken in 2, her laptop smashed into useless fragments. Every photograph, every certificate, every trace of order, violated. And the backups? Gone. She tore through the cabinet with shaking hands. Ripped apart every folder, every box, praying for one overlooked drive. But there was nothing. They had taken it all except the one in her boot. She collapsed to the floor, the weight of it all crashing down on her shoulders. For a moment she just sat there, surrounded by the wreckage of her life's work. Then she broke. The sobs came like a storm, violent, unrelenting, from a place too deep to name. She pressed her fist to her eyes as if she could block out what had just happened, as if she could erase the sight of her office in ruins, as if the system hadn't just reached into her world and ripped the truth from her hands. The wreckage still surrounded her, splintered wood, broken glass, torn files, and a silence so heavy it rang in her ears. Maya sat alone in the center of the ruined office, her knees drawn to her chest, eyes glazed with tears that no longer fell. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. And somewhere in the darkness, a memory rose, uninvited but undeniable, a memory of loss, of sacrifice, of the exact moment the fire in her almost went out. It started with a phone call, a Tuesday, cold, gray sky. She had just left her criminal law class, still clutching her textbook, notes highlighted in desperate colors. Her phone rang once, twice. Unknown number. "Is this Maya Jennings?" a voice asked. "Yes. We're calling from the state correctional facility. I'm sorry to inform you that—" The rest dissolved. The ground slipped. Her knees buckled. Her father was dead. No warning, no explanation. Just a flat voice on the line reading the end of her world like it was a grocery list. They said it was an accident. Inmate altercation. Wrong place. Wrong time. Again. He had always been in the wrong place at the wrong time. That was the story they told when they arrested him. That was the story they fed the jury. And now it was the story they used to close his file forever. She didn't even get to say goodbye. The funeral was quiet. No casket, just ashes in a cheap box. The state didn't pay for funerals of felons, even wrongfully convicted ones. Maya and her mother stood alone under a cracked umbrella, the rain soaking through their shoes. Her mother, Ruth, held her hand with a grip that trembled. "We'll get through this," Ruth whispered. But Maya didn't believe her. She wanted to quit, wanted to burn her books, throw her laptop into the street, disappear into the kind of nothing her father had become. What was the point of studying justice in a world built on injustice? What was the point of learning laws no one followed? She stopped going to class, stopped checking email. For days, she lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, the light above her blinking like a dying pulse. Bills piled up. Notices came and went. She didn't care. Until one night her mother came home from the diner, uniform stained with grease, hands cracked from dishwater. She didn't say anything, just walked to Maya's desk, opened her wallet, and pulled out a handful of crumpled bills. Tip money, singles, and coins. She placed them gently on top of Maya's unread textbook. Maya watched, frozen. Her mother's voice was soft, but it cut deeper than a knife. "I clean floors so you can change the world," she said. "Don't let them win." Then she went to the kitchen and quietly began washing the only pan they had left. Maya didn't sleep that night. She sat in front of her books, hands trembling, flipping through pages that once felt like burdens, but now looked like weapons. She stayed up until dawn, reading constitutional case law, rewatching trial footage, memorizing statutes. And when the sun rose, she was still at the desk, eyes red, mind on fire. That was the night Maya Jennings came back to life. But now, years later, as she sat in the ruins of her office, she felt the fire flicker again. The rage and grief she'd buried clawed its way back to the surface. She had spent her entire life climbing out of the pit they'd thrown her father into. Law school hadn't come with scholarships or safety nets. She had worked 3 jobs just to survive: waitressing, tutoring, delivering groceries. She wrote legal essays in parking lots using stolen Wi-Fi, skipped meals, sold her textbooks at the end of each term, praying she wouldn't need them again. And through it all, her mother kept pushing forward, mopping diner floors, scrubbing motel toilets, always smiling when Maya came home, no matter how tired she looked. It had all led to this moment, to Eric DeWitt, to a broken door in a stolen flash drive. And now she was back where she started, on her knees, drowning in injustice. She almost gave up. Again. She almost let it win. But then, from the corner of her destroyed office, she spotted something. A small, dirty object peeking from beneath a pile of shredded documents. Her father's photo, the one she'd framed and set on her desk. Somehow, it had survived. The glass was cracked, the edges bent, but the image was untouched. Her father, Lionel, smiling on the day he helped her move into her dorm. He had worn his best button-down shirt, even though it didn't fit anymore, and brought a plastic bag of snacks he'd saved from commissary. He believed in her, even when no one else did, even when the system stole everything from him. Maya reached for the photo, cradled it like something sacred, and pressed her forehead against it. She wept again, but this time, not just in grief. This time it was fury and fire. "They took everything from us," she whispered, "but I'm still standing." Her father hadn't lived long enough to see justice, but Eric still could, and she wasn't going to stop. Not until the men who ruined lives from behind mahogany desks knew what it felt like to lose. Not until Carrington answered for every lie, every cover-up, every death. Not until the world heard the truth, even if it killed her. The fight for justice is just beginning. More shocking twists are ahead. Don't miss a moment. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay with us. Thank you for standing for truth and justice. Where are you watching from? Let us know. The knock on Maya's door was sharp, deliberate, and came at 3:12 a.m. She was still awake, of course. She hadn't slept in 2 days. Her office was still a disaster zone, but she'd relocated temporarily to a safe house, a cheap apartment with a busted elevator and no neighbors who asked questions. When she opened the door, the man standing on the other side was older, taller than she'd expected, with a gray beard, broad shoulders, and eyes that looked like they'd seen everything, and regretted most of it. "Carl Bridges," he said, "you've been digging where most people don't survive." Maya hesitated, her instincts on high alert. "I heard you were dead." "Close enough," he said, stepping inside. "They made sure I disappeared after I got too close to Carrington. They didn't kill me. They just shredded my pension, smeared my name, and dumped me into obscurity." "And now you're here," she said. "I'm here," he replied, "because I've been waiting for someone else crazy enough to keep fighting." He pulled a black duffel bag onto the table. Inside, laptops, signal jammers, a portable drive with tools Maya couldn't name but instantly trusted. He opened a folder and spread out blueprints. Altrex Capital's downtown data center. "This is where the real story lives," he said. "They don't keep evidence in folders. They keep it buried in encrypted databases, guarded behind 6 layers of firewalls and 2 armed guards. But I know how to get in." Maya stared at the blueprints, heart hammering. "Let's do it." That night, under cover of darkness and adrenaline, they moved like ghosts. Carl had done his homework. Security rotated every 35 minutes. The blind spot between the main gate and utility entrance lasted only 12 seconds. They hit it at 3:47 a.m., slipped through a vent panel behind a recycling chute, and were inside in under 5 minutes. Servers blinked like watchful eyes. They ducked low, moving between cold metal racks until they reached Terminal B. Carl connected the external drive and tapped away, bypassing firewalls like peeling back armor. Maya held her breath. Lines of code raced across the screen. Then, access granted. Carl grinned. "Welcome to the belly of the beast." Inside were payroll documents linking Carrington to offshore accounts, wire transfers disguised as vendor payments, internal memos outlining a strategy to blame a compliant employee for the financial breach. Eric's name was everywhere. Planted, manipulated, framed. Then they found the smoking gun, an email chain from Carrington himself. "DeWitt is disposable. If this leaks, we pin it on him. He's the perfect scapegoat. Nobody asks questions when a black man is accused of stealing." Maya felt her hands go cold. They downloaded everything. Gigabytes of evidence. Receipts, charts, personnel logs, internal audits, all tied to laundering schemes, political payoffs, and the orchestrated destruction of one innocent man's life. When they slipped back out into the night, Maya knew there was no going back. She didn't run to the police. She didn't call the courts. She went straight to the people. By 8 a.m., Maya stood in front of the press. Though they hadn't been invited, she live-streamed it from a parking lot rooftop, the skyline of the city rising like a monument to corruption behind her. Her voice was clear, calm, but every word carried the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights and the ghosts of every innocent person the system had buried. "My name is Maya Jennings," she said, her face pale but her eyes burning. "And today I'm bringing the truth to light." She held up a flash drive. "This contains documents pulled from the servers of Altrex Capital, evidence of widespread financial fraud, money laundering, corporate espionage, and the deliberate framing of an innocent man, Eric DeWitt." Thousands watched online. Within minutes, reporters started appearing. Cameras were pointed, mics held forward. But Maya didn't stop to take questions. She uploaded everything, live to the cloud. She emailed the data to every major news outlet: CNN, The New York Times, Reuters, independent watchdogs, legal networks, human rights organizations. She even sent it to anonymous leak forums, giving the story no single owner. No one could kill it now. This isn't just about Eric DeWitt, she continued. This is about every person who's ever been discarded by a system designed to protect the powerful, about every voice silenced behind bars, every truth buried under money. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, calls from unknown numbers. Threats, probably. She didn't answer. We will not be quiet anymore. If the courts won't listen, the world will. Carl stood just behind her, arms crossed, watching the live stream climb into the hundreds of thousands of viewers. Then millions. The evidence spread like wildfire. Headlines erupted before her live stream even ended. Whistleblower lawyer exposes billion-dollar conspiracy. Altrex Capital accused of framing employee in fraud case. Email leaks show racial bias, political collusion in corporate scandal. The hashtags exploded. # Justice for Eric, # Altrex Files, # Maya Uncovered. The pressure was instantaneous. By noon, the Department of Justice had released a statement promising urgent review of the material presented. That same hour, Carrington's legal team announced he was unavailable for comment. By 2 p.m., his private jet was grounded in New Jersey. By 3:17 p.m., the SEC raided Altrex headquarters. Maya sat on a bench in the back alley behind the rooftop, her body finally shaking from the weight of what she had done. Carl handed her a bottle of water. You just cracked the ceiling, he said. She looked up, her voice hoarse. Let's see how hard it shatters. But exposing the truth didn't bring peace. It brought a storm. And in the hours that followed Maya's broadcast, the powerful struck back with violence, vengeance, and a brutal message. You went too far. The first blow came without warning. Carl Bridges never made it to the safe house. At 6:12 a.m., just hours after the evidence was released to the world, he was found unconscious in a motel parking lot, blood pooling beneath his temple, ribs cracked, his laptop smashed beside him like an afterthought. No money stolen, no signs of struggle, just precision violence, the kind meant to send a message. Maya got the call while watching her press conference replay on a cracked phone screen. Her stomach twisted as she raced to the hospital, only to find Carl in critical condition, his head wrapped in gauze, breathing through a tube. They tried to finish what they started 10 years ago, the nurse whispered. Maya stood frozen, fists clenched, pulse pounding like a war drum. I told the truth, she muttered. Why does the truth always cost so much? But it didn't stop there. That afternoon, a warrant was issued for her arrest. The Department of Justice, now under fire, had pivoted hard. The official charge, unauthorized access to a federal-level protected system. The very government she'd exposed was now accusing her of being the criminal. Maya Jennings, civil rights lawyer, whistleblower, daughter of a wrongfully imprisoned man, was now a fugitive. She barely had time to process it when her phone lit up again. It was Rachel DeWitt, Eric's wife. Maya answered, heart racing. Rachel was crying. They took him, she sobbed. They took Eric. He didn't even make it home. I got a call. It was a voice I didn't recognize. He said, if you don't stop this, they'll send me his body in a box. Maya's hands went cold. Her voice trembled. What did they say exactly? Rachel's breath hitched. They told me to tell you. She knows what she took. Tell her to give it back, or we start making people disappear. Maya dropped the phone. This was no longer about data or headlines. This was war, real, bloody, personal, and the enemy didn't hide anymore. They followed her in broad daylight. 3 men in black suits, identical build, sunglasses at night, fake casual. She spotted them near the corner store, then again outside the hospital. One leaned against a black SUV, pretending to talk on the phone, but his eyes never left her. The third time she ran, Maya ducked into a parking garage and bolted toward her car. A black sedan peeled out of nowhere, tailing her with deadly calm. She didn't wait. She jumped in, jammed the key, and the engine roared to life. The moment she pulled onto the street, the sedan followed. She floored it. The chase began. Tires screeched as Maya tore through the city, weaving between traffic, her eyes flicking to the mirror every half second. The black car stayed on her tail like a predator tracking prey. She turned hard onto Fifth Street, running a red light, horns blaring behind her. Her heart hammered, breath short, sweat slick on her palms. They were gaining. She took another sharp turn, down a one-way street in the wrong direction. Headlights blazed. Angry drivers swerved. Still, she kept going, adrenaline flooding her system. The sedan didn't hesitate. It followed her into the chaos, engines snarling like a beast. Maya spotted a narrow alley just ahead, barely wide enough for a car. She had one chance. She yanked the wheel. The car swerved, metal kissing brick as she slid into the alleyway. Sparks flew. The side mirror ripped clean off. Behind her, the sedan tried to follow, but miscalculated. It clipped the wall. Too tight. The car slammed into the alley's edge and crunched to a stop. Maya burst out the other side, tires screaming as she shot back onto the open road. Free. For now. She drove 2 more blocks before pulling into an abandoned construction site. She killed the engine, heart still racing, eyes wild. Silence. She sat there in the dark, gripping the wheel, hands trembling. This wasn't just retaliation. This was a full-blown counterattack. They were trying to erase everything. The evidence. The witnesses. Even her. They tried to silence her. They failed. Bleeding, hunted, branded a criminal, Maya Jennings had survived the fire. And now she was ready to burn the whole rotten system down with her. In the shadows of an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, Maya sat hunched over a bank of laptops, her fingers moving with furious precision. Carl was still unconscious. Eric was still missing. And the so-called justice system had labeled her a wanted cybercriminal. So she turned to those who didn't play by the rules. The first message she sent wasn't to the courts or the media. It was to Anonymous. Within minutes, she had a reply. "We've been watching. Upload your data. We'll make sure the world hears it." Maya didn't hesitate. She opened the drive they hadn't found, the encrypted archive Carl had secured before the attack. Inside, a digital tomb of secrets, memos, transcripts, offshore wire transfers, dozens of innocent names, names like Eric's, people of color, immigrants, whistleblowers, all framed, all erased. She uploaded it. At the same time, she contacted global journalists, ones not bought by corporate ads or political favor. The Guardian, Der Spiegel, Al Jazeera, ProPublica. She sent a private signal to a network of human rights attorneys across the US and Europe, people she'd studied from afar for years, people who had gone up against dictators, tech giants, and billion-dollar industries. And now they were listening to her. Within hours, the world moved. Anonymous dropped the first bombshell, a live stream with a masked figure, the voice distorted but deliberate. This is not just about one man. This is not just about one case. This is a system, a machine, designed to destroy lives and profit from pain. The screen behind him lit up with documents, dozens, hundreds, then thousands. Every single one linked back to Altrex Capital. They had done this before. To dozens of black professionals, underpaid employees, and political opponents. They'd used forged records, planted evidence, manipulated bank data, and always walked away clean. Until now, the hashtag number sign Altrex files exploded across the internet. News agencies scrambled. Government officials were blindsided. The DOJ was flooded with public outrage. Protesters flooded the streets of DC, New York, Chicago, Atlanta. And in every crowd, people carried one name, Maya Jennings. But Maya didn't stop there. She arranged a virtual summit, a bold move for a fugitive. On a secure video call, she appeared alongside top international journalists, civil rights lawyers, and digital security experts. Her face was weary, bruised, but unshaken. "This isn't just about Eric DeWitt," she said. "This is about a corporation weaponizing the justice system, about a government that looks the other way, and about every one of us who could be next." Screens across the globe carried her voice. She walked them through the documents, fraudulent arrest reports, sealed court transcripts, internal emails celebrating successful target neutralization. One memo even described how Carrington had paid off local officials to keep judges quiet. She didn't speak as a victim. She spoke as a warrior. "I'm not asking for sympathy," she said. "I'm demanding accountability." Meanwhile, the FBI, under pressure from both media and international watchdogs, was forced to issue a public statement. These allegations are serious and will be investigated. But Maya knew better. She didn't wait for justice. She made justice run to catch up with her. The leaks went nuclear. CNN led with a headline that stunned the nation. Over 40 wrongful convictions linked to Altrex capital conspiracy. The New York Times followed. Internal emails reveal systemic framing of black professionals, company executives involved. Across the country, victims began to come forward. A tech consultant wrongfully jailed for wire fraud. A nonprofit accountant accused of embezzlement. A single mother who lost her child after a false drug charge. The pattern was undeniable. And every name, every ruined life was connected to Altrex. America had seen corruption before, but this was different. This wasn't about bribes. It was about strategy, about intention. And Maya Jennings was the woman who cracked it open. Carrington's face was plastered across every screen. His carefully curated empire began to crumble. Sponsors pulled funding. The board suspended operations. A federal grand jury began preliminary hearings. The stock price of Altrex Capital dropped 46% in 2 days. But even as the empire shook, Maya stayed underground. She knew it wasn't over. The men in black suits still searched for her. Threats still buzzed through encrypted messages. Carl remained in a coma. Eric's location was still unknown. And yet she kept fighting. Because now she wasn't fighting alone. International human rights organizations launched formal demands for prosecution. The United Nations Human Rights Council issued a statement condemning systemic manipulation of legal systems for profit. Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, all flooded with videos breaking down the scandal. Teenagers, law professors, ex-cops, they were all explaining how Maya Jennings had exposed one of the most dangerous frauds in modern American history. For once, the world wasn't distracted. It was awake, and it was watching. Back in the warehouse, Maya stared at the glowing laptop screen. News feeds pulsed. Her inbox overflowed. Legal offers, protection teams, whistleblower alliances. Even members of Congress were asking for interviews. But she only cared about one thing. Where was Eric? He was still out there. Somewhere. And Maya hadn't gone through all this to leave him behind. As the night deepened, Maya stood and zipped up her coat. She slid the last backup drive into her jacket, checked her burner phone, and pulled the hood over her head. The war had changed, but she wasn't finished. Not until every lie was exposed. Not until every name was cleared. Not until the machine that stole her father, nearly killed Carl, and tried to silence her, was torn apart from the inside. And this time, the whole world was watching her do it. The fall came fast and loud. It began with the raid. At exactly 6:47 a.m., a black SUV convoy stormed through the gates of Carrington's estate. Helicopters thudded above. Federal agents in tactical gear surrounded the mansion, weapons drawn, commands echoing through bullhorns. And in the center of the chaos, Randall Carrington, the man who had once pulled the strings behind boardrooms, prosecutors, and judges, stood barefoot in a silk robe, hands raised, blinking into the blinding light of justice. It was over. Inside his private study, agents uncovered encrypted hard drives, burner phones, offshore account ledgers, and a briefcase with unmarked bills. A survival kit for cowards who knew their time was coming. Carrington didn't speak as they cuffed him. He didn't resist, because deep down, he knew it. Maya had won. The footage of his arrest went viral within minutes. Networks interrupted programming to broadcast it. Headlines screamed across screens, CEO arrested in national conspiracy scandal. Altrex kingpin in custody, corporate collapse underway. But that wasn't the only reckoning. 2 hours later, a press release hit every major news outlet. Effective immediately, Judge Leon Whitmore has submitted his resignation, citing a conflict of conscience. What the statement didn't say was that internal investigations had found records, transcripts of sealed meetings, campaign donations from Altrex-backed shell companies, and communications between Whitmore and Carrington's legal team before multiple trials, including Eric DeWitt's. He had taken orders from a corporation while wearing the robes of the law, and now, like every corrupted pillar Maya had struck, he was crumbling into dust. She read the news from a safe house outside D.C., barely breathing as she watched justice finally begin to unfold. Not as headlines, but as consequences. Carl, still recovering but conscious now, grunted from his cot. "Told you. Roaches scatter when you turn the light on." But Maya didn't smile. Not yet. Not until she saw Eric walk free. And when the day finally came, it hit like a flood. He stepped out of the detention center flanked by 2 attorneys and 3 U.S. Marshals. A crowd had gathered, holding signs that read, "Free the Framed" and "We Believe Eric." His wife Rachel ran first, throwing her arms around him with a sob that carried months of torment. His daughter followed, grabbing his hand and refusing to let go. Maya watched from a distance, tears slipping down her cheeks. She didn't want the cameras on her. This moment belonged to them. But the cameras found her anyway. Because by now, Maya Jennings wasn't just a lawyer. She was a symbol of defiance, of truth, of unrelenting, uncomfortable, necessary justice. Reporters shouted questions as she passed. "Maya, how does it feel to take down Altrex? What's next for you? Do you consider yourself a hero?" She didn't stop. She didn't need to answer. The truth was already too loud to ignore. That night, the nation watched as special news segments ran montages of the case. Her first confrontation with Judge Whitmore, the break-in at her office, the leaked documents, the car chase, the press conference that lit the internet on fire. Commentators couldn't agree on what to call her. Whistleblower, activist, outlaw, legend. But to the people who mattered, the wrongfully accused, the mothers who lost sons, the communities silenced by money and power, Maya was something else entirely. Hope. She returned to the courthouse steps the next morning. Not in handcuffs, not in fear, in power. She stood before the building that once tried to crush her and held a simple manila folder, the official request to dismiss the federal hacking charges filed against her. The DOJ had no choice but to comply. They'd lost the moral high ground and the public. A prosecutor tried to speak. Maya cut him off with one sentence. "You can't arrest the truth." Applause erupted around her. But it wasn't about celebration. It was about something deeper, harder, earned. Maya didn't fade into the shadows. She didn't retire. She didn't sell a book deal. Instead, she launched an independent justice initiative, Project Reclaim, designed to investigate wrongful convictions, corporate interference in the legal system, and judicial corruption. She hired the people no one else would. She protected those still waiting for their day in court. And she worked relentlessly to make sure no one else had to live through what she had. Months later, Time magazine released a cover story titled, "The Woman Who Changed Justice in America." On the cover was Maya, standing in front of the Supreme Court, her head held high, eyes unflinching. When asked how she survived it all, she answered simply, "I didn't survive. I fought." But she wasn't finished, because for every Eric DeWitt, there were 10 more still buried. And Maya Jennings had one mission now: dig them up, set them free, and make sure no one ever called injustice legal again. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference. The studio lights were blinding, but Maya stood steady. Across from her sat a veteran anchor known for grilling world leaders and exposing corporate lies. The cameras rolled. Millions watched. But Maya wasn't here for applause or redemption. She was here to remind the world that truth still mattered. "You've become a national icon," the anchor said, "a symbol of modern resistance. What do you say to those who call you unstoppable?" Maya's lips curled, not into a smile, but into something sharper. "I didn't win because I'm strong," she said calmly. "I won because I didn't stay silent." The room went still. The anchor paused, leaning forward. "And what kept you from giving up?" Maya looked straight into the camera. Her eyes burned with the weight of everything she had seen. The judges who folded under pressure, the CEOs who treated lives like assets, the jails full of the voiceless. "I remembered what silence costs," she said. "If one person can be silenced, then none of us are truly safe. That single sentence swept across the country like a storm. Clips of the interview flooded every platform. Millions reposted the quote. Protesters etched it onto signs. Law students printed it on t-shirts. One headline read, Maya Jennings, the woman who refused to shut up. But Maya wasn't done. The next day, cameras returned. But not to a courtroom, not to a riot, not to a press conference. They followed her to a small brick building on the south side of the city. The windows were new. The paint was still drying on the trim. A modest black sign hung above the door. Jennings Legal Initiative, Justice for the Unheard. Reporters jostled for position as Maya approached the door, keys in hand. She wore no makeup, no designer suit, just a black blazer, sleeves rolled, and fire in her stride. She turned to the crowd. This isn't a victory lap, she said. It's a battle line. Flashbulbs popped. Microphones pushed closer. She kept going. Every system that tried to destroy me is still standing. The corporations, the politics, the prisons. So I'm building something stronger. She unlocked the door. The cameras followed her inside. The space was clean but humble. Bare walls, cheap desks, donated chairs. A corkboard listed active cases, evictions, wrongful arrests, deportation threats, wage theft. Names of people no one would ever know. People who still had to fight without the spotlight. At the center of the office was a photo, her father smiling beside a teenage Maya holding her first law book. She reached out and straightened the frame. A soft knock came at the door. The first client, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a stack of unopened eviction notices. Maya opened the door and welcomed her inside. No cameras followed this time, because now the real work was beginning. Over the next week, the office buzzed with urgency. Volunteers showed up in droves. Students, retired lawyers, community organizers. Donations poured in, but so did threats. One morning, an envelope was slid under the door. No return address, just the words, "You should have stayed quiet." Maya didn't even flinch. She taped the note to the wall beside her desk, right next to the Altrex settlement check, now signed over to fund legal aid. If they thought fear could stop her, they had learned nothing. One evening, after a 14-hour day of back-to-back consultations, Maya stood alone in the office, sipping black coffee gone cold. Outside, the streetlights flickered. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. She leaned against the window, staring out at the city that had nearly devoured her. She thought of Eric, finally reunited with his daughter, of Carl walking again, of her mother watching proudly from the back of every courtroom Maya had entered since she was 19. She thought of every person who sent her letters, people she'd never meet, who now dared to speak because she had. And she thought of all the silence that still screamed across this country. She turned back to the camera crew, one final segment requested for the evening news. The mic was already clipped to her collar. The red light blinked. Live. She didn't need a script. Maya stared into the lens, steady as ever, and said, "I know what you're thinking, that this is where the story ends." She paused, letting the silence speak for itself. It's not. Her voice was calm, but behind it, a war drum. I didn't do this alone. I didn't do this for headlines. I did it because I was tired of hearing my father's name whispered like shame. I did it because the law doesn't belong to corporations. It belongs to people. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing. And I'm not stopping here. The final words came slow, heavy, and sharp as steel. Because justice is never enough. Fade to black. If this story moved you, if Maya's fight lit a fire in your heart, don't let it end here. Hit that like button to support stories that speak truth to power. Subscribe for more powerful, emotional journeys that expose injustice and celebrate courage. Share this with someone who needs to believe in real justice. Your voice matters. Let's make it louder, together. Like, subscribe, stay brave.